Think about those places you walk by every day. Seemingly normal, but with a whole hidden history humming beneath the surface.
Hmm.
San Francisco's Chinatown is definitely one of those. Amazing food, vibrant culture, sure, but also a backdrop to some fascinating and sometimes pretty intense stories.
Absolutely.
Today, we're pulling back the curtain on one of those stories. The Jackson Street Boys, an Asian American street gang right there in the heart of San Francisco.
And what's fascinating when you look at groups like the Jackson Street Boys is how they can act as a kind of snapshot. A snapshot of the broader forces at play within a community at a specific time.
Yeah.
It's not just about the individuals, right?
Right.
It's about the environment that allows a group like that to even emerge and, well, operate.
Exactly. And for this deep dive, we've got some excerpts from their Wikipedia page to guide us. Our goal is to really understand the essentials,
Mhm.
where they came from, what they were involved in, and the impact they had.
Get a clear picture.
Yeah, a concise but thorough understanding. So let's start right at the very beginning. How did the Jackson Street Boys actually get started?
Okay. So, our source tells us they were established in San Francisco, California, sometime in the 1990s.
The 90s, okay.
And the name is pretty direct, really. A clear indicator of their home base, they took their name from Jackson Street in Chinatown.
Makes sense.
And interestingly, the gang was founded by three brothers, Bobby, Johnny, and Tommy San.
3 brothers. Wow, that immediately suggests a tight core, doesn't it? A real family connection right at the heart of this group.
It does. But their story doesn't begin in a vacuum, does it? These brothers, they had a history.
Right.
That's really a critical piece of the puzzle here. The information we have indicates they were former members of the Wah Ching gang.
Okay, the Wah Ching.
Yeah, and they actually switched allegiance. They defected to the Wu Hop to Triad.
Wu Hop too, okay. I've heard that name.
Right. Now, for a bit of context, the Wu Hop 2 were a major power in San Francisco's Chinatown back in the 80s and early 90s.
Big deal then.
Oh, yeah. They had even become dominant enough to push the Wah Ching, their rivals, out of the city altogether.
So you've got this established hierarchy, this existing landscape of organized crime in Chinatown. Wu Hop 2 on top, Wah Ching are out. But this dominance doesn't last, right? What shifted things?
Well, right around 1992, law enforcement started to really focus on the Wu Hop 2. They put significant pressure on their operations.
The crackdown.
Exactly. And this created a kind of opening, a power vacuum, a space for other groups to potentially rise up. And that's pretty much when the Jackson Street Boys emerged.
So it's a common pattern then.
Yeah.
One group faces pressure, creates opportunities for others.
It really is. Happens time and again. When one established group faces pressure, it can definitely create opportunities for others to step in.
It's like a domino effect, sort of. Pressure on one end creates movement somewhere else. And this new group, the Jackson Street Boys, were they operating in a completely new way, or were they following a similar playbook to the Wu Hop 2?
That's a good question.
There's a quote from an SFPD officer, I think from 2000, that seems relevant here.
Yes, that quote. The officer described their activities as, and I'm quoting here, the same stuff on a smaller scale and without the same visibility.
Smaller scale, less visibility.
Yeah, which is quite telling, I think.
Yep.
It suggests they were involved in the, traditional forms of organized crime, like extorting local businesses, running illegal gambling dens.
The usual suspects for activities.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
But perhaps trying to keep a lower profile than the Wu Hop 2 had. Maybe learned a lesson there.
Right. It raises that question about how these underground networks adapt, how they change strategies when law enforcement turns up the heat.
Precisely. Survival adaptation.
So, okay, we've got a picture of how these started and why. Let's dig into who actually became members of the Jackson Street Boys. What does our source tell us about their makeup and where they operated?
Right. So the gang was primarily made up of Cantonese members, though our source also mentions that there were some Vietnamese members as well. So a bit of mix, but predominantly Cantonese.
And territory. Still Jackson Street focus.
Their central territory was, yeah, as we've discussed, San Francisco's Chinatown, specifically centered around Jackson Street. However, it's important to note their influence wasn't confined just to that single neighborhood.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the source indicates a presence in other cities across the U.S.
Wow, okay. So that suggests a broader network then. More reach beyond just SF Chinatown.
Seems like it, yeah. But one detail that really stands out from the source is that some of their members were apparently students.
Students?
Yeah, students in middle schools and high schools.
Middle school, that's young.
It is. It's a pretty stark reminder that the reach of this kind of activity can extend into much younger segments of a community.
Yeah.
It highlights the potential for these organizations to recruit and involve youth. Makes you wonder what factors might make gang life seem, I don't know, appealing or even just accessible to kids that young.
It really blurs the lines, doesn't it? Who
Yeah.
we might typically associate with this stuff.
Right.
Okay, let's move to the darker side. The range of criminal activities they were involved in. The list in our sources, well, it's quite extensive.
It is indeed. The Wikipedia entry details a really wide array of illegal activities attributed to the Jackson Street Boys.
Like what specifically?
Okay, so extortion, racketeering, which is basically, getting money illegally, often through threats or force.
Right.
Then there's drug trafficking and dealing, arson, assault, murder, robbery, home invasions, car theft, burglary.
It just keeps going.
Oh, yeah. Loan sharking, credit card fraud, and illegal gambling. It's a significant and pretty diverse portfolio of criminal behavior.
It really paints a picture of a group deeply embedded in all sorts of illicit activity,
Yeah.
impacting the community in so many ways, from property crimes to, serious violence.
Definitely.
And the source gives us a specific example, doesn't it, to illustrate their tactics, the arson at a Chinese restaurant.
Yes, exactly. This incident apparently stemmed from the restaurant owner owing money to the gang.
Ah, debt enforcement.
Pretty much. It provides a concrete example of how they used violence, or the threat of it, to enforce those debts. Now, interestingly, while the individuals suspected of the arson were arrested,
Okay.
they were later released, which, it kind of highlights the complexities of prosecuting these organized crime cases, the challenges law enforcement can face in actually securing convictions.
Right, making charges stick can be tough. And it wasn't just these more serious crimes, was it? The source mentions something else, almost seems like a footnote, but still part of the picture: illegal fireworks.
That's right. Yeah, the source mentions their involvement as significant traffickers of illegal fireworks, especially back in the 80s and 90s.
When it was more obvious, maybe.
Reportedly more visible in Chinatown back then, yeah. It's an interesting detail because it shows how a group might be involved in a whole range of illegal stuff, some maybe more overt than others,
Yeah.
and how these activities can kind of evolve over time, too.
It's like seeing how even seemingly minor illicit things can be part of a much larger criminal ecosystem. Now, the source also highlights a particularly significant and, frankly, disturbing event: the Stockton Street shooting, June 1995.
Yes, that one was bad.
This wasn't some isolated back alley thing. Was
No,
it?
not at all. This was a daytime shooting. Happened right on a busy street in Chinatown, Stockton Street.
Daytime busy street.
Yeah. And what makes this incident particularly shocking, and just tragic, really, is that 7 innocent bystanders were hit by the gunfire.
7. Oh, my God.
7 people just going about their day, including a pregnant woman.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
That just underscores the potential for this violence to spill out, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Affecting people with no connection to the gang at all. Devastating consequences.
Absolutely devastating. It's a stark, tragic reminder of the real human cost.
The fact that 3 young individuals, ages 18, 16, and even 14, were arrested in connection with it.
Right.
That just emphasizes, again, the age range involved in this level of violence.
It does. It reinforces that point we touched on earlier about involving younger individuals. And it raises serious concerns about, well, what leads young people down that path?
Yeah.
And the brazenness of it, too. Broad daylight, busy street.
Yeah.
It suggests a certain level of boldness, or maybe just a lack of fear of the consequences.
Chilling stuff. So, okay, we've looked at where they came from, who they were, what they did, and this major incident. To get a more complete picture, it's also important to understand their relationships with other groups. The source mentions alliances and rivalries, right?
Yes. According to the Wikipedia information, the Jackson Street Boys were known to have formed alliances with other groups, specifically the 7 Stars and the 21 Boys.
Okay, 7 Stars, 21 Boys, allies.
Right. And these types of alliances can be based on, shared interests, maybe territorial agreements, or just mutual support against rivals.
Speaking of rivals,
Well, on the other hand, they definitely had rivalries, most notably with the Wah Ching.
the group the founders originally left.
Exactly. That old history likely played a big part. And also rivalry with the Hopsing Boys.
Sing Boys, okay.
And these rivalries, as you'd expect, often lead to conflicts over territory, resources, and unfortunately, often lead to violence.
So it's this complex web then. Connections, conflicts, constantly shifting landscape of who's with whom, who's against whom.
That's a good way to put it.
It really paints a picture of a localized but also incredibly intricate underworld operating within the city.
Absolutely. These relationships, the alliances and the rivalries, they're key to understanding the dynamics of organized crime in a specific area like Chinatown back then. They influence everything, really, how crimes are committed, how conflicts get resolved, or maybe more often, how they escalate.
Right. Okay, so let's try and bring this together. We've explored how the Jackson Street Boys emerged in the 1990s in SS Chinatown, kind of filling a void after that pressure on the Will Hop 2.
Mm-hmm.
We've learned about their primarily Cantonese,
Sure.
but also some Vietnamese membership, which startlingly even included students,
Yeah, the youth aspect.
and the wide spectrum of criminal activities they engaged in, extortion, drugs, all the way up to that tragic Stockton street shooting.
A broad range.
And we've also looked at their alliances, like with the Seven Stars and 21 Boys, and their ongoing conflicts with rivals like the Wah Ching and Hop Sing Boys.
Exactly. And thinking back to that police officer's comment, the one about their activities continuing, but on a smaller scale and with less visibility,
Yeah.
it prompts a really interesting question, I think, for you, for our listeners. Considering these origins, the activities, these complex relationships, what does this tell us about the sort of recurring nature of organized crime in urban environments?
Hmm.
What are some of the fundamental factors maybe that contribute to these cycles? The emergence, the growth, the adaptation of groups like this.
That's a powerful point to consider. It really makes you think about the underlying stuff, right?
Yeah.
Social factors, economic factors, the power structures within communities that might allow these kinds of groups to take root and just
Yeah.
persist even when they're not always in the headlines. It's clearly not just a simple law enforcement issue. It feels like a much deeper societal dynamic at play.
Exactly. And beyond just those cycles, it's so vital to remember the impact these groups have on the communities where they operate.
Right.
Even if their presence becomes less obvious, less visible, their activities can still erode the fabric of local life, affecting businesses, residents, the whole sense of safety and security.
Yeah.
It's a good reminder, I think, that these hidden layers within places we think we know can have very real, very lasting consequences for everyone involved.